All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to another rendition of Talk Openly. It's Tuesday, and where I'm at, it's bright and sunny, and I'm just thrilled. So, compared to the months and months of gray, this is like amazing for the Seattle area. So, I'm very happy today.
Hallelujah.
Exactly. No, that really is the feeling. And you sense it in other people like around you up here, like people are just kinder. They're saying hi to each other. Like it's kind of amazing.
Everything's sort of thawing out.
Yes, exactly. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about, our own mental health, as, as we've kind of engaged with the Dharma over the years and been able to reflect on our experiences. And so we're going to do a little bit of that tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of similar to last week. We talked about how this kind of side effect of practicing the Dharma is that you end up kind of saving money because your attachment reduces and whatnot. And so this is another kind of one of those like positive, side effects that aren't necessarily the main goal of practicing Dharma, but it certainly is nice that, it seems in general that people's mental health does improve.
It seems a little bit more directly related to the practice than saving money.
Yeah.
Like it does. I don't know, like the whole point of reducing suffering, for ourselves and others is of paramount importance within the practice, right? It's like foundational. And so I think the mental health benefits are sort of part and parcel of that, whereas saving money sort of like, that's just like a nice perk.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's gonna be a fun conversation. And if there's anyone joining on Zoom, you can always type in your just some of your thoughts in the chat. Facebook is a little bit harder for us to get to, but we can also try it.
We could try. I guess we could keep our eye on it. But if you are listening on Facebook and you want to join the chat somehow, just click on the Zoom link. Join us there.
There you go. Great. Thanks, Daniel.
Mm.
Well, Daniel, my buddy, what's going on with you? How's life?
It's good. Things are nice. Not just the weather, but just things overall very pleasant. I'm kind of dreading. I'm hoping that nobody asks me about how our little science experiment went for the last week.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. Yeah, the last time that we pulled up a random Lojong slogan, I was talking about essentially starting and ending the day with meditative practices. And I really, really wanted to be like, yes, I'm going to do it the whole time. And I'm going to have some like serious results and I'll be able to share that with everybody. And all I can say is that I did it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Like my meditation practice is consistent. It's regular. But the sort of adding the cap at the end, like what I notice actually is that there's two things that show up. One is sort of like just tiredness. It's like the end of I'm at the end of my day. I'm like, oh, it's the end. I'm going to bed now, right? And then this thought sort of occurs, like, well, you could just sit for a few minutes, right? And then I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go to bed, and so like it's all right. It's no big deal. I mean, it's really not a big deal. But then I actually have a little bit of sort of like I could, but somehow I talked myself out of it. So
interesting.
yeah, it is. I'm not gonna, you know what? I'm not gonna commit to anything. I'm not gonna say anything, but I feel just as interested in attempting this, doing it. Because I did find that when I did do a few sort of nighttime meditations before I went to sleep. And I thought it was beneficial. I thought it was fine. It was, and like you said, you can just do a few minutes. It doesn't have to be some long practice. And so I think that's good advice. And I look forward to taking it, but I'm not committing.
Totally. No, I understand that. And yeah, I think the general idea is just like having these kind of touchstones throughout our day that bring us back to our intention and whatnot. So yeah, everything that, you know, is shared here is, I think, always just a suggestion, and finding ways that work for our lives. Which is not all the time, you know, we can't always do the morning and evening. Like I didn't do that all this week. There were, same like you, there were a couple days. So that part of that that's challenging for me is not the evening, it's the morning. So um usually what's been happening lately is that I'll wake up and, you know, it's, if I were to get up at 5 a.m., then that would be the right time for me to be able to get my meditation done and get ready for work and whatnot. But usually what's been happening is I get up at 5 and I'm just like, I can't. It's just this feeling of like, no, there's this really strong resistance. Like, it's like
Right.
my very strong, and it feels like this kind of like, maybe that's this strong affliction of ignorance or whatever, where I'm just like kind of willfully ignorant, or willfully choosing, like, you know what, I just love sleep. I love sleep and I want to go back to bed.
Oh,
And so
Jac, I have just a thing. I have just a thing for you.
yeah,
I have just a thing for you. I am
oh
going
boy,
to. This is
little surprise.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I will share this in the chat if anybody is interested in. If you're listening to this, what I'm talking about is a nice song. It's called "Awakening at Dawn from the Sleep of Ignorance," and
Ooh.
the link that I shared is to a website called vajrasound.com. And if you were to Google that and the words "Awakening at Dawn from the Sleep of Ignorance," you would find this traditional chant that can be sung when you wake up in the morning. And this guy named Eric Pema Kunsang translated it and sang it in English. It's a Tibetan song, but he did it in the same sort of rhythm. And I've been doing it. It's kind of interesting, actually, because I actually got this. I'm going to show you here. I got to help with this because I really found it helpful. I even got a damaru, this
Oh,
drum,
nice.
you know, right? And so it's really interesting because you can introduce the like a bell or a damaru and then sing this song. And I do it in the mornings when I feel a little like foggy, maybe a little of that resistance in the morning, like I'm not quite ready, or like in the cases where I've set my alarm like intentionally to wake up early so that I can get my practice in. And sometimes like it's just a little too early and my brain is not quite alert and awake. And what's amazing, what I've noticed is when I'm done with the song, I'm wide awake. I'm clear. I'm ready to go. Yeah. So kind of, it's beautiful. I couldn't recommend it more. And I'm glad that you brought up the, you know, the word ignorance in this context.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I actually put it in the chat on Facebook as well. So
Cool.
so folks can access that. But yeah, I think that would really help me set the tone of my mind, right? Because you know, in the morning, my whatever tone my mind is in, usually it's very I don't know, it's almost like childish. I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna cuddle back up in bed. And you know,
Yes.
sometimes that's fine, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, of
that's
course.
great. But every day when I'm, you know, trying to make the effort to be a bodhisattva in training, you know, like that's really what my intention is going towards, is to be
Right.
sitting in the mornings and bookending my day. So yeah, something like that, including, you know, like at one point I was doing qigong in the morning before I
Yeah,
sat, things like that, like a physical way of engaging my
absolutely.
body and mind. So yeah, I know
Yep.
it's just discipline, and I think sometimes too, like if I, you know, just shifting my perspective with something like that, it means that I don't even I don't even have to think of it as discipline necessarily.
No,
It's actually just like joyful.
absolutely.
So yeah, Yeah, the complexities of my mind in the morning. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm glad that so I've always I've always been a morning person, and in the past I've generally popped up, quite early on my own even, and I'm like just pumped full of energy, ready to go, just raring to go. And what I've noticed actually lately is and might just be age, I don't know what this is related to, but a little bit more of that, what you called like this sort of childlike, like, oh, I just want to just and what's interesting about that, one thing that's really cool is I don't go fast asleep again. So like once I wake up, like the alarm goes off, I don't go like fully back to sleep, and instead I go into this weird, it's not like a dream state, but I can see what I notice, like random thoughts, just completely random thoughts, but I'm sort of aware, I see it, and I'm like, weird.
Yeah.
And then there's this long space, and then here comes another one, and they're not even, what's weird is they're not stitched together. And what I imagine is that in the dream state, why they're always so weird sort of is that we're stitching together those thoughts into a cohesive story. Whereas whatever this state I'm in the early morning where I'm not quite asleep, not quite awake, like it's more like I can just see them. They're just like sparks of thought, and they're so weird and random.
They are so weird, or just like the weirdest sentences, that you can imagine saying. And yeah, I also noticed that if I do sleep in and I'm not falling like, fully back asleep and I'm having those thoughts, a lot of times they will be on the theme of like waking up and doing stuff. And so it's kind of uncomfortable because I'm like, oh no, but I'm asleep, but I'm actively awake in my sleep state. And it's just uncomfortable. It's like I should just get up.
Maybe like the song that I shared. Maybe it's the Dakinis trying to wake you up, Jack.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I gotta listen to them. They're good. They've got some good advice. Oh man. Well, yeah, what else with training? And are you doing any other kinds of trainings in your daily practice?
I'm still I still do a lot of mantras. I've always enjoyed doing mantras. And I think I mentioned this before, but, since Geshe Sewang's visit, I really feel sort of a deepening of my mantra practice. I find them incredibly helpful. I enjoy doing it. And that's definitely, talk about like touch points through the day. That's something that is a regular part of my daily practice, so meditation and mantras, both of them. And thanks so much to you, and Marie and to Dirk. Between the three of you guys, I now also have the Lojong slogans as a daily practice.
Nice.
So yeah, I like it. I like how it's all going. And what's really cool, I told you about this book last week, that by Trungpa Rinpoche, called something like Sex, Work, and Money.
Yes. Yeah.
I mentioned the book, and then I downloaded it, and I've been listening to it. It's just an audio book that I've been listening to. It's fantastic. It's great. Yeah, nice. It's really good. It's very earthy, it's very kind of like based in our world, right? Like hence the title. Like it's really like how spiritual practice is not something that's separate from our daily life, and how we can how we can make living in a city be our practice, and how we can make our work be our practice, and how we can really how we can walk this path without having to, go hide in a cave. In fact, well, I won't give anything away. You'll have to read the book. But so it's good stuff. I'm so happy that I downloaded it. I wouldn't even have heard of it. It's the weirdest thing that I never heard of the book before. I love Trungpa's work, and this book is no exception.
Thanks for sharing it with us as a resource. I mean, anything that can help with just recognizing that we can do this. We can do this in the world that we're in right now, as horrible and crazy and messed up as it is. Right. These are the grounds for our enlightenment. And
exactly. These are the grounds, and not only that, but that we can approach it in a light, somewhat humorous way. while being serious, but still humorous.
Right, right. Yeah, gotta have both. Yeah,
Yeah.
lean too far one or the other way and you're just, yeah, you're knocked over.
It's good
Yeah,
stuff. I highly recommend the book to anyone who's listening.
nice. Well, that kind of that makes me think of how I've been doing this week, because I think I kind of tilted a little bit too far into the serious and kind of a little bit of despair. Like I've just been feeling kind of just blah, kind
Yeah,
of
give it to
crappy,
us.
you know.
Talk about it. Dish, Jac.
Yeah, and maybe, this we'll kind of talk more about it in the as we talk about mental health and whatnot. But I talk pretty openly about my mental health. That's actually partly what I do for work, is that I'm a peer counselor, and so I get to talk with people about my experiences and whatnot. And so one of my diagnoses or whatever, and diagnoses are boxes. We're in and out of boxes all the time. They're spectrums. But one of my diagnoses is PMDD, which is TMI, possibly, but premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I think we need to normalize talking about that stuff, because half of the world has that body, so we should be able to talk about.
They're gonna ban our show in Florida, Jac.
I know it's probably already been banned. But yeah, that's so part of my, every month for the longest time, I would have a week where I was high as a kite. I was on one. I was just like the most energetic, sexual, like just into my life and myself. And then the next week would be just total hell, just awful, feel like shit, think I'm the worst person in the world. And then the other 2 weeks are just being numb, just dull. And so that's not a very fun way to live.
No, that sounds awful.
It's horrible. It's like an extreme version of, the everyday roller coaster and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I started taking a type of birth control that helps with like regulating the moods. But what also happens with that, and this has worked very well for mood, but what also happens with that is that, if you're kind of controlling one aspect of your mental health, that means that a lot of aspects are going to be affected by it. And so any type of pharmaceutical is going to not just target one thing, it's going to, affect, different areas of your life. And so, I've come to a point where I feel really stable. And so I wanted to see if I could adjust my medication. And so I did that last week, and, sure enough, I started feeling just like the major doldrum.
Yeah.
And just like, that the types of things that would pop up where it's like, oh, I'm thinking about, just like die, like those kinds of things where it's like, I never ever really had that where I had any intent towards that, but I would frequently think that,
Sure.
And so to have those thoughts come back, it's like, okay, well, that's unusual. That's unexpected. So I ended up taking the day off on Monday, and just, which I think was a really good choice for me. And I'm excited that we're going to have this conversation today, because I think that what's happened is that I've just gotten so of course, the medication part, that's playing a role in it, but also just this a little bit less of intention towards my dharma practice. And I think these things kind of go hand in hand. Right, like my declining mental health means that also there's going to be a decline in my motivation and whatnot. But I think vice versa, right? And so I've just been, I've been watching it, and I think over the last few months I've shared on the show that my meditations have just been super chaotic while at the same time kind of dull. And so there's just this quality of mind that I'm having a very hard time just coming into groundedness. So I think this is a really timely show for me
Mhm.
because it's going to remind me of all the things that, are really important for me in my practice and that have gotten me so far in my life just in the last few years
Yeah.
training in the Dharma. So I'm excited.
I'm excited about the conversation as well. I'm sorry that you've been going through that though. It doesn't sound
Thanks.
it doesn't sound enjoyable.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable, and at the same time, I also know that happiness is not dependent on, these kind of like come and go feelings,
Yeah.
or of like come and go circumstances. And so I'm trying to remember that, like, okay, I know that this changes. I just know it. It's how it works. And so if I can have that awareness, then it eases up a little bit.
Yeah. Makes it a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah, most definitely.
Probably doesn't make it go away though.
It doesn't. It doesn't fully, but there's a way that it kind of pulls the lens back, right? So like, I've been so like a really, focused lens on like me, my problems. And those kind of practices, those meditations and analysis help just kind of pull back the lens. And it's like, oh, yeah,
it's like Lama's hand in front of the face.
yeah.
You
And
just
then
get
just
a
pulling,
little
yep,
space, get a little
yep,
perspective.
yep, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, good.
Well, speaking of perspective, before we kind of launch into the mental health conversation, should we check out a Lojong slogan?
I'm already on it. There it is.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna press the button. Okay,
I'm ready.
here we go.
I'm nervous.
Yeah, me too. Ooh.
Ooh, perfect.
I promise I did not set this up. This was truly
Don't
random.
fluctuate. Don't fluctuate. Okay, I'm going to read. So this is a quote from Choyam Trungpa, Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness. You should not vacillate in your enthusiasm for practice. If you sometimes practice and other times do not, that will not give birth to certainty in the Dharma. Therefore, don't think too much. Just concentrate one pointedly on mind training. Oh boy.
That's
We've been
poignant.
called. We've been called in.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And there's Trungpa with even more good advice. I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Ah,
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's good because I think both of us, from what I'm hearing us share in our check-ins, is that we're not vacillating from our practice.
No.
We're doing our training. However, maybe sometimes the enthusiasm vacillates. Or am I speaking too much for you? Maybe I can speak for myself. My enthusiasm vacillates. And so that's really important for me to consider.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, I would say yes to that, but I'd maybe qualify it a little bit more in the sense that, so, that is the good part, is that regardless of the ups and the downs, I'm relatively consistent in my practice. And so that does give some certainty in the Dharma, as he says here. As far as the vacillating of the enthusiasm, what does happen is that sometimes when the sleep of ignorance, so to speak, is heavy, then what happens is there's a slight like questioning, let's just say a weakening of my confidence or faith or whatever you want to call it, like that. And that's why conversations like and thinking about reflecting on things like what we're talking about tonight, about our own personal lives and how, like maybe having a little hindsight and saying like, what was it like for me in the past and what is it
That's
like
right.
now, is really, really helpful. I know that it's been helpful to me to witness it. It's sometimes easier to see in other people. So I know that you've been a great source of this for me, Jac, where, like I can see where I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I remember Jac from way back when, and look at how different they are, and like these things are really working, right? And I see that in other people as well, even people who just come to beginner's meditation for maybe a few weeks. I notice the changes there, and that's inspiring. It's a little harder to see in myself, and that's why I feel like it's really important to sometimes take a minute and reflect on it, and that's what we're doing tonight. It's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good pointer for folks. Just that kind of like having a little bit of perspective with ourselves, that, okay, here I am now. And yeah, it feels hard because samsara is hard, but let me think back on how it was even a year ago.
Yeah, think
But
about how much
especially,
harder it was.
yeah,
Right.
but especially, thinking before we met the Dharma, man, life was hard. Life was really hard.
Mm. It was really hard, but I take it for granted, Jack. That's what happens is because I can't help, I'm just here now, right? And I'm kind of like, no, this is just how I am. This is how things are. Like, it's always been this way. I forget, right? It's really
Yes.
easy to forget. And it's easy to sort of like, sometimes, especially if I'm feeling kind of down, mopey, whatever, during those sort of downward slump of things, it's easy to sometimes be like, well, sometimes it was really nice to like whatever chill out with some weed or
Yeah.
like that kind of thinking kind of begins. And then I just remember the chaos and confusion and despair and anxiety and all of that. And I'm like, whoo, okay, no, that's
Yeah. No
okay.
thanks. No
I'm
thanks.
good. I'm good.
I take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Oh man. Well, yeah, thanks for that. Random Lojong slogan generator on the
Yeah.
website.
Is it really random?
I
Somebody
know,
set
right?
that up. I'm sure of it.
Well, let's jump in. Let's talk a little bit about our mental health journeys along our engagement with the Dharma.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, Daniel, do you want to kick us off? What are some things that have come up for you in thinking about this?
Well, I thought maybe we could start with some of the like what I think is sort of universal. It seems like it's somewhat universal, which is anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah.
Which, we've talked about this in the past, and I know it's kind of cliche to say this, but it seems to be true, right? That, depression tends to be, related to issues in the past, and anxiety tends to be, that you're occupied with something in the future. And so both of those, mainly anxiety, but it vacillates between it always was somewhat depression on one side and anxiety on the other. And I've noticed, in myself, like I never actually, I didn't think too much about myself as an anxious, depressive person, but I could tell that I was like, and I don't want to like self-diagnose, and I don't think it's a proper diagnosis anyway, but I want to just sort of, I oftentimes imagine that like I'm essentially on the bipolar spectrum, right, so to speak, and maybe not at this sort of severe end of it, but that one thing I've noticed in myself and in some of my family members, my close like siblings, is this sort of like yo-yoing, sort of like
Yeah.
what you described. Actually, it's very familiar what you described. This sort of like these highs, sort of manic, wild, crazy, lots of energy, and then these like slumps where just everything sucks and it's so
Yeah.
hard, and then periods of like numbness, although in my case I think it was self-induced numbness.
Sure.
But that's something that was so prevalent, and what I've witnessed is, again, not that these things have disappeared. Anxiety still shows up, depression still shows up, and what's amazing to me, the part that I'm so grateful about, is that it doesn't stick around very long. Like it used to be. Like I reflect back, and there were sometimes these sort of episodes would last a long time, and I'm talking about
Right.
more on the depressive, well, on both ends of the spectrum. I could get stuck in one of those places where like maybe it was high energy, but it was also high anxiety, right?
Right.
And at the same, or I get stuck in these like terrible slumps where just like similar to what you said, Jack, where like, yeah, I knew I wasn't gonna like off myself, but the idea of annihilation sounded pretty good,
Just being
like
done.
just being done. Just like, can somebody just like check me out? Like I'm good. Like it's fine. I don't need to be here anymore. And so even though like sometimes I get like little touches of that, but like in the past it could last months, months, maybe even longer if I really think about it. But it's it's gradually, like at this point, I sort of like, I notice sometimes it can last maybe, a few hours or a couple of days, maybe at the most,
Yeah.
and then it just moves on. It's just like it just flows through, and I'll be aware of it, but I don't act on it, which doesn't so it doesn't make the problem worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I
you
was gonna
know
ask, yeah, what do you
yeah.
attribute that to, that lessening of the time being in that space? What is that? How did that happen?
Hmm, magic. No, no, I don't know. I think that a lot of it has to do with, essentially like not believing so much of my thoughts, and just like essentially letting the mud settle, right?
Mm,
Like that's really what I attribute it to. And I don't know, I can't say it's any one particular practice. I mean, I've been meditating for a while, and that seems to be quite helpful. And when I don't meditate for a while, then some of that stuff starts to show up a little bit, a little bit heavier. And so I
yeah.
think it's like a settling of that. And I know that I was catapulted forward when I took refuge and took the vows, because primarily, my primary sort of coping mechanisms, related to essentially, I think it's considered substance use disorder or whatever, where you're just trying to fill the fill the void with
Yep.
something.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I always thought of it, well, it's like I'm expanding my mind, or I'm exploring consciousness or whatever. No, I was just trying to get high because I hated this life.
Yep.
I didn't like the way things were. And so I wanted something that was different. But the problem with those methods is, the positive, if there is something positive to come from it, it's very short lived. And there's a lot of negative that comes with it, and that's sort of longer living. So it's just like it snowballs. Like, you really, like, I was constantly shaking up the mud, right? And adding more mud and shaking it up some more and adding some more. So things never got better, they just got worse. So,
Yeah.
I was going down that path. And now that I sort of have a reverse course here, right? Going the other direction. And so I notice as things clarify, my mind has gotten a lot calmer. My thoughts aren't so confusing and hectic. I have a lot more, as you were saying, more space. I can
Mm,
distance. I can just see it. I just see, like, oh, look at, oh, there that is, no biggie. Whereas in the past, if I had a thought, like, I was incredibly judgmental and
it was
opinionated.
real, right? Your
It was
thoughts were real.
real. It was real, like I was just talking, oh my God, like, this crazy stuff. I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. I'll tell a quick
Yeah.
story. So so I never thought of myself as an angry person, right?
Mm,
Like, I have always thought, and people, oh, you're a nice guy, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm nice, I'm a mean well, I'm good, I'm pretty, I'm not like into fighting people, stuff like that. But my kids, they've commented, they're like, you're not such an angry person anymore. And I'm like, I would never was an angry person. Like, what are you talking about? And
wow.
then they'll say, do you remember the barber shop? And that and that
Uh-oh.
is, I remember, right? So I try to make it as short as possible. Basically, I lived in this apartment complex where there was one parking spot, and it was really important that it was my assigned parking spot. There was
Yeah.
no place else to park. And I kept running. There were businesses in the area, and people who went to those businesses would sometimes park in my spot and be gone for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And one day I show up with my kids. I tried leaving notes, I tried everything, but it didn't matter. There was always somebody different doing it. So I show up
Right.
one day, and the kids are in there in the car, and I pull up, somebody's in the spot. I was I was pissed off. I was so mad, and I was like, I'm gonna teach these kids something. It occurred to me because I had to justify it. So I was like, I'm going to teach these kids that you don't take this stuff laying down, and that you have a way of changing your world. Let's go,
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so they go in tow, and they're like, what are you going to do? And I said, just watch this. And I walk into a barber shop where I just knew, I was like, hey, that guy's got to be parked. That guy, I know he's in here. So I go into this barber shop, all these big old tatted up, beardly, manly men, right?
Yeah.
And it was a full barber shop. And I go in there and I just yell, like, you know, who owns this car, this make and model car? And there's a guy getting his hair cut in the middle, like the barber's like cutting his hair. And he
Yeah.
says, oh, that's my car. And I let loose. I mean, and everybody's trying to tell me to calm down. And I'm screaming at the guy, telling him he needs to get over there quickly, move his car, or all kinds of bad things are going to happen. So they
Wow.
stop cutting his hair in the middle of the haircut. He walks over with me and these two little girls, right? My
Yeah.
two little kids, with me screaming at this guy all the way back to his car, telling him all about how his mother didn't raise him right and all this stuff. And still in my mind, I'm thinking this is righteous, indignation, and I'm
Right.
teaching my kids something and whatever, right? And I was teaching him something, I know. Not what I wanted to, but it worked. The guy moved his car, but it was this extreme demonstration of like reactive anger, right? And the anger came about because I was living in this anxious, depressed state. Right. So it was something, my needs weren't being met in many different ways. And so, I found myself, like, anger was an expression of that stress of anxiety and depression and just general suffering, whatever you want to call it. And so it's really amazing to me, to reflect back, and I realized, like, that wasn't the only time. That was just one of many examples of really sort of destructive behavior. And and to have my kids just be like, just remember the barber shop,
Yeah. And they just had to drop that one word.
Just that one word, and like, and there's so much like that, Jac. I notice this all the time. I don't want to talk about it all because there's just too much, right? But like, so much of this, like, judging other people as bad or just jerks. I was always on the side of justice and rightness, but the whole world was just wronging me left and right.
Yeah, it's a horrible place to be.
That's terrible.
It sucks so bad. Yeah, it kind of makes me think of that, that idea that that my happiness is a zero-sum game, right? That, like, if other people, like that guy gets my parking spot, then everything's ruined, and I can't have happiness because this person took one thing that is supposed to be mine. And he can no longer be happy, right? Because he made me unhappy. And it's just, it's just this, like, the dominoes falling of, like, harm being spread around.
It is.
That comes out of, like you said, that anxiety of being so uncomfortable, where we are, and not knowing that anxiety comes from an incorrect view of what's actually happening.
That's right. That's right.
Rather than
exactly.
It's this guy's fault, it's actually no, it's my perception that everything should be done the way that I want it to be done, and I get everything that I want.
Right.
And practicing the dharma turns that whole perspective around. It's about everyone else.
It's spiritual alchemy, right? It's spiritual alchemy, turning crappy old lead into some shiny, valuable gold. And that's why I firmly, like, that's where, like, some enthusiasm for the practice really comes from, is when I reflect like this, I'm just like, right. Like, the other thing besides, I was gonna say the other thing about the other thing that I attribute besides mindfulness, meditation, all that, I think that the Sangha has been really helpful to me, because when I'm in that, super judgmental, opinionated, stressed out, whatever, I want nothing to do with all these crappy people, right? I was always like, I just hate people, right? It turns out, no, I didn't hate people. I just had distorted thinking, right? And now, like, and so I was super isolated, and that makes for even more depression, right? Absolutely. And it makes it so that you believe your thoughts more because there's nobody correcting your stupid thoughts, right? So like, it's just like this snowballing effect. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And I really feel like no longer being isolated. I have community, I have connection, I have meaningful relationships, I have friends, I have responsibilities, all of that stuff. And it's a godsend, right? Like, it's so amazing.
Yeah, you said a couple things in there that are just, like, huge for any type of recovery, is connection and responsibilities, right? and that those two are linked, like, I have to show up to this every Tuesday because it's one of my jobs. It's one of
That's
my
right.
dharma jobs,
Yep.
and so I have to be, I have to prepare myself. I have to make sure that I'm, meditating consistently because I got to practice what I preach. And so, having that stability of the Sangha and knowing that, people are relying on me in one way or another, incredibly valuable. And then of course, just the connection, I have wonderful friends outside of the Sangha, but it's 100% necessary if you're really working on, being on this path, to have friendships with people who are also on that path with you, because there's just things that, my non-Sangha friends maybe just don't quite understand, and that's okay, they don't have to, right? But
They're benefiting from it anyway. Just because because you're doing this, they're benefiting by having a better relationship with you.
Most definitely. Yeah, that is 100% true. I'm thinking about, my relationship with my partner, which like used to be like, I was just such a mess and like, just like kind of a jerk, really selfish, and our relationship is really stabilized. And, he's not a Sangha member, but yeah, that has been, really a testament to the work that I've done on myself through the Dharma, is that like we're still together. that is pretty incredible. Amazing. When I think about it. Yeah. Because if I hadn't, been training and meditating, I'm almost positive that we would not be together, because I was just so unwell. And I when I think back about, my times of being very, mentally unwell, so much of it was because I was just so like stuck in here and had this narrative of who I was, and it was firm, it was solid, and I was, and my view of myself was not positive.
Right.
And so it was like, very ego-centered. There's two types of egotisticals, right? It's like the one that thinks they're the best in the world, and then the one that thinks they're the worst in the world, right? Yep. They're two sides of the same coin. And so that's really where I was just this like super egotistical, negative space. And it's horrible. And in fact, so much so that like my thoughts were obsessive, thinking about how bad of a person I was. Yeah. It was sad. It was messed up and messy. And the ways that I would, try and control people in my life to like, through my behavior or my actions, to try and get any type of like positive feedback from them. Yeah. And really what I was doing was just changing my personality and myself to try and, please other people, or what I thought other people wanted. It wasn't even necessarily what they wanted. And I started my recovery process before I met the Dharma, but it really wasn't until I met the Dharma that I could actually, be with myself. Lama talks about how like, it's really important to, in your meditation, is you're really, what you're doing is you're expressing to yourself that I'm okay to just be right here, with myself. I don't have to be anywhere else. I don't have to even change anything about me. I am okay right here, right now, exactly where I am. And that was just so deeply profound, for me to witness from him, and then also start to experience, for myself. And another aspect of Dharma practice that's been really interesting for me, that I had a lot of resistance around at first, was doing kind of like tantric practices or guru yoga practices. And that's, if you go into the Lions Road Dharma Center temple, you'll see there's all these, paintings, which are called tankas, up on the walls. And so these are kind of like the guru yoga deities. And in tantric practice, I started to see how like, this type of meditation, it's like involving all of that, like enlivened imagery, right? This very colorful and engaging imagery, and then kind of working on embodying that. And how cool is that like even at this state where I feel like a total piece of shit, like I embody these qualities of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating, and I think that's really like that's actually a practice in like popular psychology too, is this kind of like practice of theater and movement, where people do kind of drama, where they kind of act out certain things, or they'll even do like Shakespearean plays or whatever. And there's something about that where you're embodying a character, where you get to see that like, oh, actually I am strong, I'm confident, I'm loving, all of these things I am capable of being. And it's kind of sometimes it can feel a little bit fake it till you make it, but
Totally.
that's okay. Like we get to try those things on and see like the path towards that.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. That's the whole thing, right? I don't know about faking it, but acting it, until you make it, right? I remember, like part of the amazing part of those tantric practices. One of them, the Vajrasattva practice of, purification. I'm not talking about purification from like sin or anything like that, but just sort of cleansing our mental state. I remember being completely just mucky, yucky, and having no knowledge whatsoever about Tantra or any of this, and just coming to the practice and just doing it, and having the same kind of like, I don't know what this is about or whatever, but I'd get it like a little taste because you actually feel it, right? Like the visualization, you actually feel it in your body and in your mind. You're like, there it goes, right? Just for a moment, everything is clear, everything's clean, everything's okay, right? And don't you worry, I went and I got it dirty again as soon as I got out of the practice, right? But for a little period, I got a little taste of it, right?
It's so important.
Exactly. And all these qualities that are embodied, that's what you're talking about, right? Acting it out, sort of, feeling that, like, what would it be like to be so wise, right? Or so compassionate or so enlightened, right? Oh, it's beautiful. What an amazing practice.
It is really amazing. Yeah. And like you said, it kind of leaves you feeling, you're changed, you've had this kind of transformation, and which is really empowering because, we've all experienced some forms of trauma over our lives, and trauma is very disempowering. So reminding ourselves that actually we do have this power inherently, and we just got to work to bring it out. It's incredible. And it's just like, it's very inspiring. And I'm definitely going to do a meditation after this because I'm feeling like I got to get to it. But I guess other things for me, just a very simple, like observing whatever state of mind I'm in and trying the best I can to not be judgmental about it, right? Because, and it's really been hard work the past few months, as I've described, it's kind of like very dull while at the same time, chaotic mind. And, working towards like, can I bring compassion to that state of mind? Because after all, it is just a state of mind, it's not permanent. It's not going to be there forever. I really don't have to change it. I just need to witness it and bring awareness to it. What is it like to have that mind? And then also what that does, if I really, allow myself to, remember my training, then I can turn that out. Right. So it's not just about what's happening here, but I can turn that out and remind myself, who all these people, all these sentient beings who are experiencing the same exact suffering that I am right now. I'm not alone. And and there's just something about that that is so healing. And of course, it's hard to it's hard to recognize that, yeah, all of us are experiencing some form of suffering in one way or another. But then in that way, it's inspiring. It's like, okay, well, then I can keep going. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just me, and I have work to do
Yeah.
for all of us.
The term that I've heard that you remind me of, the term that I've heard in mental health areas is emotional resilience, right? It does make us more resilient. It's because there is this sort of like, it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. It is all going to change and it can be better. It's hopeful in that sense.
Definitely. Yeah, and even just, that kind of where we can kind of shift our minds to recognizing that, happiness is not even dependent on my state of mind or on what's happening in front of me. It's not dependent on circumstances being, what I like or dislike, that it really comes from within. And there's a recent example of this for me, nothing too profound or anything. But I wanted to get a passport. So I went down to my local courthouse. And apparently they only do it 2 days a week. And so there was, like a line out the door. And I just had to acknowledge, like, and I didn't bring any books or anything. I was just kind of like, all right, this is going to be my day. And I hadn't planned it, it was kind of like spontaneous, like, I need to get my passport soon. So I'm just going to do it today and then I'll come back and do the rest of my day. But no, it was like an all day endeavor. And so it was great because I kind of just decided, like, you know what, let's just engage with what's happening right now. I'm going to try and reduce idle distractions, like not really get on my phone that much. Let's just sit, let's watch what's happening. And it was quite beautiful, like just being in that space, being with other people, like someone started talking to me because I think maybe they felt drawn to just,
Yeah, because you're open.
There. Yeah,
You're
I'm
available.
available. Exactly. I'm available. And I love that, that we can decide to engage with our direct environment at any time. And what that does to our minds and also the minds of others around us. This is incredible.
Yeah. I love it. It's gorgeous. And I couldn't help but think, that I imagine when we said available and open, ready to connect, that essentially like the other way, the sort of the egotistical way or egocentric way of going about things, it's closed off. It's totally shut down, right? There's certainty, there's solidity, there's the exact opposite of availability, right? Like even if you want to connect, it's in a prescribed manner. It's according to this set logic, this way things happen to be, the way you know them to be. Whereas if you let all that be and you're not trying anything, you're just present with what is, calmly open, then all kinds of amazing things can happen, amazing connections with other people, and just you discover opportunities to help. And as a bodhisattva in training, being observant and watching other people, other beings in general, I think like it does open us up to those opportunities to be helpful to other beings. If you have your head stuck in your phone or a book or something while you're waiting in line because you just can't be bothered or whatever, like this is boring, then how in the world are you going to be able to be present for folks who might be able to benefit from your company?
Totally. Gosh, this is really opening my heart because I've just been really feeling like a lot more closed to the last few months, and it's been a little more acute the last few days, and I've been noticing those exact kind of behaviors of like, I'll kind of just like put my head down when I'm walking, because I'm just like, I feel like I don't have the energy to engage with others. I'm just kind of like, oh, I just got to get to work,
Right.
and get to the grind. And so just reminding myself that like, oh, the world is actually quite astounding when I can open up to it.
Yeah, the thing is that the flower is always closed up before it blossoms.
That's
Right?
true. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Especially up
spring is
there,
here.
especially up in Seattle, it takes a little longer.
It does. Yeah. Spring is finally here, though. It's going to
Right.
be 70 on Saturday, which is awesome.
It's going to be 90 here.
That's wild.
Yeah, the flowers are all going to be withering up. They're done.
But your gardens are going to be booming.
They are. They're so full of weeds right now.
Yeah.
After all that rain, I've been pulling weeds like crazy. It's amazing.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I bet.
They're beautiful, though. I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's very, what's the word? Verdant.
Verdant. I like that word.
Me too. Full of
Yeah.
life.
Full of life. We can be verdant in our own spirits and hearts, practicing in the
May
dharma.
it be so.
May it be so. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel motivated. I feel happier. And yeah, Sangha is just so important, isn't it?
So important. You're important to me, Jac. Thanks for being here. Thanks for always talking to me on Tuesdays and whenever I need you. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too. And a fun kind of announcement. Sometime next month, we haven't nailed down a date yet. We're going to be talking with our very own teacher, Lama Jinpa. And so be on the lookout for that. That's going to be really fun. I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's going to be great.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, take care of yourselves. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Daniel.
Bye, Jac.